harm and abuse group teaching session. So just a brief reminder to ensure that you do not copy from the presentation, and you can give examples of practice where possible. So the first question we're going to be looking at on this unit is describe the role and the responsibility of the practitioner, which is yourself, and others about children or young people who have experienced harm or abuse. So yourself, you're the practitioner. What is your role and responsibility? So within your role and responsibility, you are responsible to report any concerns. You have a responsibility to coordinate services, the use of services which is relevant to the needs of the child. You have the responsibility to document. You are, a main responsibility you have to undertake is to be able to give the young person support and show them empathy. I've got a few listed on the screen, but realistically, when it comes to supporting a child who has been subjected to harm or abuse, your responsibilities and your job role is quite substantial. So think about the work that you are undertaking with the young people and write down some of the ones which you feel are relevant. So others' responsibilities. So when we look at supporting a child or a young person, it is crucial to identify any concerns, to record and report accurately, and sharing information with professionals should they need to know. Obviously, we've got to adhere to confidentiality and GDPR of the child and young person. But there is a number of professionals out there as well who hold a large amount of responsibility for raising concerns. You've got obviously law enforcement, so you've got police, even people such as paramedics, other healthcare professionals such as nurses, doctors, GPs, dentists. They all hold a responsibility when it comes to supporting a child. You've also got the parents and guardians. They have a responsibility as well. And education. So schools are one of the largest places that actually raise safeguarding concerns on children and young people. During the COVID period, the safeguarding concerns decreased dramatically due to the schools being closed. So there is a lot of concerns that do get raised through education provisions, such as schools and colleges, etc. And obviously you've got the child protection agencies as well. They have a responsibility as well. So the next question is, explain the importance of establishing trusting relationships with children who have experienced harm and abuse. It's really important to build relationships with a child who has been subjected to harm or abuse. It's important for you to show them emotional support. A trusting relationship will offer emotional support to a child. It's allowing them to be able to feel that they can openly converse with you and express their upset without that fear of being judged. It has the ability to be able to support building confidence up in that child and young person again. When you've got a trusted relationship, again, it gives you the opportunity to be able to build interventions and support around the needs of the child. You can, or you are able to offer safety and well-being. Trust is the foundation for a child's safety, and it also supports the healing from harm and abuse. When you've got a trusting relationship, it gives you the opportunity to be able to empower them. Having that trust, it gives them a feeling of confidence and a feeling of safety, multiple things. But this gives a child empowerment. It gives them the safe place to be able to feel if they do need to make disclosures. Once you have a trusting relationship, again, you're able to support the young person to build resilience. Now, children and young people in care often have a large amount of resilience because of they've survived whatever lifestyle they have been through. But your responsibility is to build resilience with them, to aid them to cope with all of the challenges that they've actually been through. They've survived them, so your job is now to support them to cope with what they've been through. Again, once you have this relationship established, it gives you the opportunity to be able to role model, show them what's expected of them, show them how to behave within the home, teaching them how to behave when they're in the community by actually role modeling these actions. Children do look up to us. They look for us for examples. All of these will evidently support a child or young person to begin the healing process. So the next question is, describe how to access support in situations that are outside of the expertise, experience, roles, and responsibilities as a practitioner. It is essential for practitioners to recognise when they need support, prioritising the well-being of those involved. It's really important to actually have that intelligence to recognise that sometimes things are beyond our expertise. We will need to seek additional support. Things such as reflective practice, document recording, reporting, ethical decision making, consulting with specialists, having that additional training and developing that you need to be able to support them until we have additional support measures in place. You're responsible to work with a multitude of people to be able to support support the child or young person. Think about how you use your multi-agency networks to be able to support them. And you may have embedded into your company a in-house therapist. You may have some art therapy that you can take them to. There is music therapy. There's lots and lots of different professionals out there that can actually offer the support to the children and young people. We know obviously there's CAMHS available, but sometimes, the waiting list at the moment is very, very, very substantial. It's very long. I think I heard today it was 4 years. I'm not sure if that's accurate, but still a very, very long time if it's not quite 4 years. So think about all the other professionals that are involved. The GPs, going to see your doctors, see if they can give some advice, support, or maybe they can signpost you to somewhere else. But using all of these strategies that are on screen will be able to help you support a young person. So the next question is, explain the importance to take full account of a child's level of understanding when responding to disclosures of harm and abuse. So think about the children that you work with. I've written up here that a child's cognitive and emotional differences impact their ability to communicate experiences. Adapting responses to their own comprehension ensures effective communication, supporting emotional well-being and empowerment, respecting their autonomy, fostering trust, avoiding traumatization. It gives you the opportunity to tailor interventions. So think about it from your own personal experience. A child or young person who have been neglected or have trauma from being abused or harmed, quite often or not, will have the capacity of a child much younger. So you could be working with a child who's 12 years old, but due to the trauma that they've suffered and the abuse that they've been through or the neglect, they may well have the capacity of a 7 or an 8-year-old. So it's about having to support that child at their age appropriate level. So even though they are 12, you'll be looking at supporting them at maybe it's a 7 or 8-year-old's capacity. So therefore, as opposed to perhaps communicating with them, you may well have to play games with them. You may well have to get them to draw pictures or do writing games or reading stories, or you could do play through making cakes or making objects of Play-Doh. It could be just that simple as to taking it down a few years. Trauma has a detrimental impact to a child's development cognitively. So you need to keep this in mind when you're supporting it. I've worked with a 17-year-old girl, and the abuse that she suffered was so horrific that even though she was developed and the size of a 17-year-old girl, she was possibly about 12 years old mentally. So you do need to keep these in mind when you are supporting a child, especially when you're responding to disclosures. Keep an open mind that they could be displaying a disclosure through drawing pictures. They could be making disclosures through acting out scenes. They may even link it into maybe it's cartoons or things on the TV that they're watching, and they may start reenacting the show that they've watched, but adding bits in there. So it's about always being aware. So this is how to avoid actions or statements that could adversely affect the use of evidence. So when you are documenting, recording any forms of conversations or disclosures, it's really important that you follow the following in maintaining the objective. So you've got to avoid expressing personal opinions or bias. It's important for you to maintain what's being said, maintaining the objective of the conversation of what was being said. You've got to refrain from using professional language and keep it very clear. Avoid also using slang language or, be mindful of offensive terms. You've got to be clear on everything that you are writing, as things can be misinterpreted. You've got to avoid speculation. That's really important. So when you are obviously, taking the disclosure, it's really important that you are avoiding leading questions. If you're seen to be leading questions, it could be actually result in the disclosure being null and void, effectively. Follow your protocols, follow your procedures of how you've been trained within your company, and also be mindful of confidentiality. Obviously, when we're taking disclosures, we will be having to share this information, but just be mindful of whom you're sharing this with. I've just put remember, when you are doing this, we've spoken about all the correct terms that you're doing, but remember, it is just important to make sure that when you are documenting something, it's dated, timed and signed, and obviously it has to be legible. I am the worst person in the world. My handwriting is so atrocious, especially when I'm thinking fast. It gets messier and messier. If the disclosure has been handwritten and it's illegible, it can't be used in court. It can't be used as evidence. So do remember when you are that everything is written clearly, dated, timed, and signed. If the young person signs it, wonderful. It's more than likely that they will not want to. But just do remember these are just as important. Why is it important to share with the child or young person who and why the disclosure which has been had will be shared with? When a child discloses, it's vital that they have an idea of who the disclosure is going to be shared with. It gives them a feeling of empowerment. Knowing knowing what's happening gives them makes them feel empowered, making them feel involved in decision making and sharing of this sensitive information. It gives informed consent. It can support building that trusting relationship. It will clear up sort of communication, and it can build and maintain that trust because you're being clear with them. It ensures that you're not breaching confidentiality and that you are recognising that it is for safety purposes. This will hopefully ease the anxiety around the potential consequences of what has been said or what has been disclosed. You've got legal and ethical compliance that you have to adhere to, so making sure that you are following the ethical standards and you are safeguarding the child. Having that collaborative support. You need to explain the involvement of who you are going to be sharing this information with. It's really important that the child has an understanding of whom and why you're sharing it with a social worker. Are you going to be sharing it with the police? More than likely, if there's an adult involved, you're going to be sharing this information with the police. The child needs to understand this. And then obviously I've put on there as well, respecting the child's perspective. Having an understanding, we spoke about earlier about supporting a child's capacity. When you're explaining this, help them to be able to understand at their own level. I'm helping them to sort of understand why this is happening. So the next question is, describe best practice on how to respond and support a young person who discloses the abuse that they have experienced. So here's some examples of best practice. Obviously, ensure that they feel safe. Take steps to immediately implement safety. So if you are looking at, maybe as a more relevant disclosure is that they've made an allegation against a staff member, what are you going to do to make them safe? If it's a staff member, you may look at communicating with your manager if they're there available. You may have to be looking at having that staff member removed to make the staff member, to make the young person feel safe, and to obviously ensure that the staff member is removed from any further harm from each other, really. You're going to document it. You've got to obviously complete relevant paperwork. You've got to highlight what's been disclosed, and then you've got to log it and record it and report it. So that's one of the massive ones. You've got to demonstrate your belief, and you've got to validate that this disclosure has been acknowledged and it's going to be dealt with. So stay calm and offer reassurance. When you're supporting a young person with a disclosure, it's a very, very difficult situation. Not everyone has experienced this, and you might not experience this, but when a young person is disclosing to you, quite often or not, they're looking to you to see how you respond. So how you respond can actually have an impact on whether the disclosure continues or whether the disclosure stops. So please be really mindful of how you're responding to what you're being told. Obviously, ensure that you're always up to date with all of your training. It's really imperative that you are relevant in training to be able to recognise. I spoke about earlier the signs. There may be discrete signs that the young person's trying to make a disclosure. Obviously, I've spoken about avoiding investigative questions, so refrain from sort of pressurising the young person into more detail. Just let them speak freely. And then obviously we've spoken about confidentiality, so we need to make sure that this information remains confidential where applicable. If we're going to have to share information, we're going to have to share it with the relevant people, and it's about needs to know. Who needs to know? So share it with who needs to know. You've got to demonstrate that you're respecting their autonomy. Allow them to decide and involve the authorities should this need to happen. Show that you're listening actively. Again, it sits hand in hand with what I said earlier about how you're going to respond to this. Show that you're actually listening, not watching TV, not distracted on anything else. Just make sure you're there and you're a parent. So follow your procedures. So follow your protocols when it comes to taking down disclosures. Report to whom you need to report to. You could offer professional help. So we'll be looking at getting some additional support in should the young person require it or would like it. You may need to update parents, guardians, people who are in the child's life. And again, it's about need to know. If there is a child who's a Section 20, the parent will need to know, obviously, if the disclosure is not about their parents themselves. We've obviously got to adhere to cultural sensitivity. We've also got to provide information to the child and young person, letting them know what's going to happen next. Keeping them up to date as much as possible. So after you've taken the disclosure, advising them that I'm going to be sharing this with the manager and your social worker, explaining to them why. We spoke about this earlier. So this is all examples of best practice. This is when you're demonstrating the very best practice. So just be mindful, some of you may not be able to give examples of this, but when you're answering this question, I want to see your understanding of how to support this. Why do records about disclosures of harm and abuse, why must they be detailed, accurate, time dated and signed? We spoke about this earlier, didn't we? It's to offer that continuality of care, to offer a good level of communication, to adhere to the professional standards and the protocols, having that level of accountability, but also being transparent. Obviously, we have to have the evidence for the legal proceedings to be able to allow this disclosure. Should it need to go to court, should it need to be investigated by the police, we need it for that purpose. Legal compliance as well, if it goes through the court system. I said earlier about legible, it has to be completely clear and readable. To monitor and evaluate what's happening next, keeping an eye on the young person at all times, especially after disclosures. Protection, so ensuring that you are demonstrating how you're protecting that child and keeping them safe. Again, risk assessments and management and quality assurance. So all of these things you have on screen are the reasons why that all of your disclosures have to be accurate, dated, time, signed, so on and so forth. So again, you may not have experienced this, you may not experience this, but we need to be able to show your understanding on this. So please ensure that you answer in sentences. So the next question is, outline sources of information and guidance about how to support a child who has experienced abuse. So there is a number of professionals that you can use to support a child that's been subjected to harm or abuse. Obviously, we've got psychologists that are available within the companies or some companies. You've got your child protection policies. You've got government guidelines to adhere to, child welfare agencies, professional training programs. So sometimes we might need to up our knowledge to be able to support the young person. Community resources. There's a lot of online support now as well, so you can actually go onto the NSPCC website and there is links of support there to be able to seek out additional support. There is also Young Minds as well, so you can actually offer the young person to speak with somebody when there is disclosures or when there is a level of harm and abuse. You know, we work really hard to build this relationship up. You know, we build a relationship with a young person and a child to allow them to be able to disclose to us. But sometimes it can have a flip around effect. Sometimes the relationship's so strong between you, they don't want to. They don't want to talk to you about it. They may well have had the confidence to maybe disclose to you, but they don't want to talk about it any further. So sometimes having that impartial person that will come in and speak to the child, or they can speak to them online, will actually be more supportive than what you can actually offer. And that's quite hard to actually to manage and to deal with yourselves, because obviously, you know, this relationship's here and you'll be caring for the child. You have things like clinical supervisions as well. So some companies are offering clinical supervisions for staff, and that's just to enable them to be able to offload what they've found out, what information's been shared. It gives them the opportunity to find out new resources from the psychologists to be able to support themselves and the child as well. So do think about all of those support systems that they are in place, and again, do a little bit of research on it. Have an internet search and see what things are available. So how do you support, the next question is, how do you support a child to deal with distress, fear and anxieties which has been caused by harm or abuse? This is your daily job. You know, this is what you are delivering on a daily basis. But let's cover them. Offering emotional support. You're going to offer them that level of support so they can have that relationship to be able to talk about what's happened or what they've been through, or, you know, express how they feel, their fears, etc. You're going to monitor. You know, one of the biggest things as well when we talk about supporting a young person that suffers from harm and abuse is naturally it's built into us. We want to help. We want to give them something to help take away the pain. We want to, you know, let's get you to counselling, let's get you to this, let's get you to that. Sometimes, very simply, after a child has disclosed harm or abuse, or when they've perhaps just arrived into the home and it's all so new, sometimes they just need a little bit of time. Sometimes you need to just take a step back, be there, be available, but just give them that bit of time. We've got a number of therapeutic services that we can use to offer further support. Obviously encouraging that really strong level of communication. So obviously another thing we'll do as well is we'll spend time providing education. So when the child is ready and they've they're a bit more prepared and feeling a bit more secure and come to terms with what's happened. We'll offer them education. We'll educate them around appropriate relationships, and help them be able to understand different emotions and why they might feel what they feel. There is an array of support that we will put in place to support a child with upset and anxieties following this. So we're going to describe positive coping strategies that a child can be supported to develop, supported following harm and abuse. Oh my goodness, I do apologise. We're going to look at positive coping strategies. So supporting a child in developing positive coping strategies. So let's have a look. We've got offering the safe spaces. I said that earlier. It's really important, giving them that little bit of space. Introducing mindfulness practice. Encouraging journaling. Really, really, really effective, actually, the strategy. Give them a journal, give them the opportunity to be able to write down how they feel. Teaching them problem solving skills, teaching them how to self-regulate, really. And when they're feeling upset or angry, we have to be able to teach them how to self-regulate, because we're not going to be around forever. And it's about learning to live with what's happened, not so much trying to overcome it. So you're going to teach them how to build supporting relationships, building those positive relationships with others. Obviously, we're going to be seeking out counselling and therapy. That's imperative. We must do that. A really, really obvious one that maybe you don't always think about is just having that routine. Establishing a strong, bounded routine will support them. We will be looking at, obviously, teaching them physical activities. Again, really, really, really effective strategy to support a young person. Get them out, get them in fresh air, get them running, get them bike riding, get them down the beach, whatever it is you need to do. These sorts of strategies will help them to be able to manage how they're feeling. There's a number as well. Obviously, you've got creative, you've got relaxation. I think that's probably a little bit harder for children, especially younger age, to be able to engage with, but it is a possibility. But there is an absolute number there. So think about it. Think about some of the strategies that you might already have in place. You might be able to link it into the answering this question. So describe behaviours that a child may display that might give you cause for concerns following harm or abuse. So these are some of the behaviours you might see. A child might become withdrawn or isolated. A sudden shift in mood. Regression. Regression is it's actually quite common. So they basically start going backwards as opposed to developing and progressing forward. Obviously, we've got self-harming behaviour. That's a really common one. Excessive anxiety or worry, so overly upset or overly worried or frightened about certain things that perhaps they shouldn't be that fearful on. Aggression. Change in academics, so change in academic performance, such as education. Are they not engaging as well in education? Are their grades slipping? Sleep interruptions, so we're going to be looking at, obviously, if they're waking up in the night all of a sudden. Fear of specific people or places, that's a really big one. Avoiding certain activities, and again, a big one is a change in eating habits. When you're observing these concerning behaviours, it's essential to approach the child with empathy, listen to them without judgment, and involve relevant professionals such as counsellors, therapists, or child protection services to ensure appropriate support and intervention is offered. Describe ways to work with children and young people to enable them to develop protective strategies, and build resilience. So you can see a whole load of examples on the screen here. But we spoke about it a little while ago. I said to you about teaching them how to self-regulate. We have to teach them how to control and manage their emotions, because as they reach 18, as you well know, they can't go around punching people in the face. They can't go around smashing windows. They have to be able to learn how to self-regulate. So these are some of the ones that you may use. Obviously, having that open communication line, give them the chance to speak and express how they feel verbally, encouraging that and teaching them. Some children don't know how to communicate, so we might need to spend some time actually teaching them how to communicate. You'll be teaching them how to have healthy relationships. One of your biggest responsibilities is teaching them about appropriate relationships and healthy relationships. You're doing it on a day-to-day basis, but you might have to do a little bit more education on healthy relationships peer on peer. Quite often not, they may struggle with this. You're going to be looking at life skills, developing them in life skills, teaching them how to problem solve and make decisions. We're going to be building their self-esteem. We do that every single day. That's one of our most important job roles. Like I said earlier, they do have a large amount of resilience already, but it's important to keep adding to it. You're going to offer a trauma-informed approach as well. So being sensitive to their past traumas and ensuring that you've access to support services. And I said earlier, didn't I, emotionally regulating them, helping them to be able to identify how to cope with their own emotions. So explain circumstances when restrictions need to be imposed and the involvement of key people following harm and abuse. So restrictions on key people may be needed in harm or abuse cases due to the legal requirements, safety concerns, conflict of interest, privacy protection, and risks of re-traumatizing, non-compliance, professional misconduct, and for those children and for the child's best interest. Decisions should be prioritised on safety, welfare, and applying restrictions. So I spoke about it earlier, didn't I, about if there's been an allegation to about a staff member by a young person. So that staff member is actually a key person in that child and young person's life. So we're going to have to implement a restriction straight away. If there's been an allegation or a disclosure made towards that staff member, straight away we're going to have to implement restrictions. Obviously there'll be investigations that happen, there'll be the whole situation will be looked into massively, but that person needs to be removed. Much like if there's been an allegation or a disclosure made about the young person's parents. This may result in them not being able to have contact with their family member. It may be going through the police and the court system, so there will be restrictions involved until the investigation is over, or even unfounded, should I say. But there will be restrictions put in place. Do keep this, keep this at your in your head really, because the restrictions may already be in place. So if you are supporting a child or a young person and there is an element of restriction to whom they can see, i.e. the social worker has said there's no contact with mum or dad or nan or granddad, it's important to keep that in your mind. So it is sensitive. So always keep that in your mind. So let's have a look at the next question. So explain ways of supporting a young person to understand why safe and consistent boundaries for themselves and key people must be set and maintained. So supporting a young person to understand safe and consistent boundaries involves the following. We need to educate them about boundaries. You probably experience this on a daily basis. Quite a lot of young people have no concept of boundaries, especially personal boundaries. That can be a big factor, but we need to be some educating on personal boundaries and their purpose. Well, we need to be encouraging this open communication, empowering autonomy in setting the boundaries, teaching the importance of consent, linking boundaries to safety and well-being, discussing healthy relationship dynamics, exploring consequences of boundary neglect, demonstrating through positive role modelling, encouraging self-reflection on values, emphasising on consistency and enforcement, acknowledging individual differences in boundaries, creating a judgment-free, supportive environment for boundary discussions. These strategies aid a young person in recognising the importance of boundaries in relationships. You will be experiencing this on a regular basis. Children and young people in residential care, or in the care system, really quite often have very little boundaries. So one of your biggest part of your job role is to teach them how to implement boundaries. You will implement boundaries around the home and rules and regulations, but you will be role modeling implementing boundaries, personal boundaries. So think about how you might do this. Role modeling will be one of them. You will be obviously undertaking key working sessions and having these communications with them. You will be opening them up to opportunities to be able to experience others in the community. So you'll be taking them out to places such as, I don't know, trampoline parks, or you may be taking them to big play parks. You may be just taking them shopping. You may be taking them to the supermarket. It's where they will start to learn very small levels of boundaries and identifying communication cues, really. They have to be able to learn very quickly their own boundaries. One of the biggest concerns with children and young people who transition out of the care system, so they go into semi-independence or independence living, because of they are vulnerable still, because of they have had little experiences with building relationships or having that friendship, quite often they can struggle with making friends, peer-on-peer relationships. One of the highest risks for a child or a young person when they're transitioning out of residential care into independence is the risk of them being cuckooed. So cuckooing is where another person takes advantage of the young person. They may start asking them for money, lending them this, befriending them, making them feel like they're friends. They may start saying, can we stay at your house? They may start using their house as a party place. It's a really, really incredibly common occurrence. So if we are successful with educating a child or a young person how to implement boundaries, the idea is to prevent things like this happening later on in life. If you look at a partnership relationship, so you've got a husband and wife, or wife and wife, or husband and husband, teaching a young person boundaries of relationships is incredibly important for when they go on to adulthood, when they do get married, when they do have these committed relationships. It's going to hopefully help prevent abuse, for them to be, not abused, for them to not be treated unfairly. It's going to be able to support them to hopefully have a healthy, loving relationship. So it's a really big part of our job role, and actually quite difficult, to be fair. So how do we make use of our supervisions to reflect on our own emotional responses to harm or abuse. This is quite a sensitive area. When we're supporting children and young people that have been through horrific levels of abuse, they have been neglected in ways that you could never imagine. When you are learning about all of these things that have happened to them, maybe you've had a young person make a disclosure, it can hit us hard. In fact, it can hit us incredibly hard, especially when you, like I said to you before, about recognising that the staff that are doing this job have experienced personally some form of neglect, abuse or trauma, or have been around somebody who is close to the family who have experienced it. So there's a lot of potential triggers when supporting a young person who has experienced harm and abuse. So using your supervision to communicate how you're feeling, if something has affected you, you need to be able to articulate how if you've been triggered, if there's something that's upset you, this transparency will ensure that you are kept safe, and it will also ensure that there is a level of consistency and care for the children and young people. For example, if you are triggered by a young person shouting, really excessively shouting, if your manager does not know that this is a trigger for you, it could result in many things, really. It could result in you leaving, not doing your job anymore, not wanting to be there anymore. It could result in you responding to the verbal shouting. You could start shouting back. It could trigger you to get upset and cry in front of the young person, which evidently could in turn cause them more upset. So having that transparency about how things may be affecting you will allow your manager to implement strategies to be able to support you. We are human beings. We are not robots. We have been through a world already of pain, joy, happiness, and there is going to be, at some point within this job, something's going to affect us. So please, if you take anything from this session, please do take this bit of information. Use your supervisions wisely. This is not just a robotic procedure that you have to follow. This supervision is yours and it's here to support you. So I've put on here, the next question is explaining when additional support may be needed for dealing with your own thoughts and feelings. You might need some sort of additional support besides obviously supervisions. Obviously, there's a number of reasons, but we've got to look at, I've said personal triggers. It could be ethical considerations taken into consideration, intensity of emotions. It could be the impact of professional functions. It could be your own lack of coping strategies. The thing is, there could be a number of reasons why you are struggling at some point or finding things difficult. So it's at this point, by identifying any of these issues, where you may need additional support. You may need some professional bodies, you may need some legal counselling for ethical consideration. You may need to have some therapy. You may need to have some counselling. You may need to have some time out. You might need to have some time out. You might need to have a week off work to recover. You may need to be put on light duties. There's a number of things that can support you. You may be referred to external organisations. There's lots of online services now that you can attend. A lot of the companies offer a mental health first aider as well, so you can actually go and seek support from them. So remember, your supervision is your first port of call, but if there is any additional support needed, that it is available and you can seek out this support. So you've reached the end of your session. I know it's been a long one today. It is a very, very big unit and it's worth a lot of credits. So please ensure that you, again, I remind you to answer questions in full, no bullet points, and give experiences where you can. But thank you for attending.